Welcome to Fine Tuning with Drew Taylor, your one-stop shop when it comes to animation news and commentary. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and Mr. Taylor, whose writings on the industry you can regularly read over on the Wrap, and whose musings on the Mission Impossible movies you can listen to on Light the Fuse, the official Mission Impossible podcast. He and I are recording this week's show on Friday, August 16th, 2024. And all right, going to tell you right off the top here, folks, this is going to be kind of a different show because Drew and I spent this past weekend covering the D23 Expo and then came home and went right to work. And the two of us are, what's the play term, Drew? Fried? Is that
I
what
think
you're...
that's I think that's the all ages term.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we are both a little fried. So we thought this would be the loose leaf edition of Fine Tuning, that rather than our usual structured script, we would kibitz about what we saw and did at the D23 Expo this past week, and share our thoughts on that. And I've got a couple of books here that I picked up at the expo. Likewise, arrived in the mail while I was out of town, but we'll talk about those in the second half of today's show. But first, before we get started here, just want to acknowledge our sponsor, and that is, of course, Touring Plans. And if you're headed down to Central Florida anytime soon to sample some of the theme parks that you can find around the city beautiful, well, Touring Plans can help you save time. More importantly, it can help you save money as you wander around Disney World and Universal Orlando Resort. So please check them out at touringplans.com. But before we get into our official reminiscence about this year's D23 Expo, I want to direct folks to the wonderful story, Drew, you did this week about Muppet Vision, which you kind of connected the dots in a way that people hadn't up until this point. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So yeah, I woke up to a very, let's say, frightened or something, message on Sunday morning about just how dire the situation is for Muppet Vision. So I thought I would write about that and had some help from some great people. But basically, the gist of it is that there was a much more explicit piece of artwork that showed that Muppet Vision was going to be replaced by the Monsters, Inc. coaster. And that artwork was replaced at the last minute by more tame artwork. But people still figured it out online. But the fear was that Josh D'Amaro would get booed, which we have seen before, Jim, as you and I have witnessed Chapek getting booed in earlier panels from previous D23s. And yeah, I mean, it sucks because it's such an important attraction for so many people, and certainly an important attraction to myself and those of a generation. But it sucks. It's a bad situation, but boy, it got people talking, Jim. I'll tell you that.
It did. And I think for me, the part of this, and again, now it's important to understand here that that's a piece of concept art, and but at the same time, just the way they framed this, we keep calling it the Disney Parks and Resorts presentation, but it was Disney Experience.
Experiences, Jim.
There we go. Okay. Yeah. And I think what makes me kind of crazy about this is if we go all the way back to when Jim Henson first approached Michael Eisner about the Disney company buying the Muppets, one of the things that Jim was most concerned about was that the characters would live on after he was gone. And one of the reasons he decided we should approach Disney is Disney has managed to keep a lot of characters evergreen. And in fact, at this D23 presentation, we got to see the trailer for the Snow White live action that's coming up next March, right?
Yeah, and we saw those of us in the room. You weren't at the presentation.
No, but but the irony is it was so Comic-Con too. I mean, don't get me wrong. Once upon a time, if you went to Comic-Con, and you went to a panel, if you were in Hall H, what you saw in that space, other people never saw. I mean, um, do, do you remember when they, was it Guillermo's, the trailer for his version of the Haunted Mansion with the Hatbox Ghost?
Right.
That didn't make it out of the room. I mean, only if you were there, you got to see it, or somebody held up a phone. Maybe you got to see it. But on the other hand, for example, the studio panel, I want to say it was, well, you were there. You were filing stories for the Wrap from the floor. But
Yes.
the trailers for these things went out like 5 minutes after the announcement.
Yeah. There was also a lot of bootlegging being done on the ones that didn't go out officially, which I was shocked by, because usually, Disney is pretty good about putting the kibosh on that, but
Totally.
they just let them run wild.
No. I mean, but at the same time, when what was it? What was the story? 250 TikTokers were invited to the show with the notion of they wanted a giant social media presence. So I think Disney turned a blind eye to a lot of this stuff just because they wanted people talking this up. But anyway, to get back to, Jim Henson brought the Muppets to Disney because the notion was that Disney, being so skilled at keeping characters like Snow White and Pinocchio and these films from the 30s that were still relevant and still out there where the public knew and loved these characters 50, 60, 70 years later. And there's no other way to say this. Disney has kind of mismanaged the Muppets since they officially got their hands on them in 2003, 2004?
Whoa, that's a controversial take, Jim. Controversial.
Well, look, and a lot of that is because think about the other acquisitions that Disney has made since that time. I mean, what is it? 2003, 2004, Disney gets the Muppets, but then January 2006, it has Pixar. 2009, August, they get Marvel. Then it's 2012, Lucasfilm, and then Fox. The Muppets are so far back in the pack at this point. I mean, it seems like every couple of years they'll make another stab at it, but it's always seems to be a one and done. I mean, the most recent thing being the thing with the band, right?
Electric Mayhem.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, we got one season, that's nice, and they move on. So I think that's the thing that most concerns me personally, is that this thing, Muppet Vision, it's not the very last thing Jim Henson worked on. In fact, ironically enough, I think that was the Muppets Go to Walt Disney World special.
Yeah. I mean, that aired. I mean, it was the last thing released that he had worked on.
There we go.
Yes.
There we go.
Yeah.
And again, so the notion that this is Disney, basically, it's like, yeah, it's one of the last things Jim Henson touched, and it means a lot to folks, but it can go away. I mean, I get that the Disney theme parks are not a museum, but at the same time, I think you so brilliantly pointed out in your article, it's like, how many Muppet movies have involved saving the Muppet Theater?
Yeah.
And now here we are. Life imitates art. Oh, by the way, Drew, I seriously think that you should move quickly and find out what the font was for the Save Mr. Toad shirts. And you should be the guy who does the Save Mr. the Frog shirts.
Right.
That Nova could have so many dog toys on the back of the sales of those things. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I will chain myself to the Miss Piggy fountain.
There we go. But anyway, if you have not read Drew's wonderful story about this, head over to the Wrap. But again, you're the guy who got the initial call out, and it's interesting to watch what's going on now. And as I understand it, we're recording this again on Friday, the 16th. And my understanding is in a week's time was when Disney was originally scheduled to not only make the announcement but to release the art. But again, in classic Disney, we don't want bad news to have huge impact, but it was supposedly going to be released after the markets closed. And I'm hearing now they may be backing away from that plan. The info being released next Friday, but we'll see. So anyway, back now to the actual D23 Expo, and like I said earlier, Drew was in the room for not only the experiences presentation, but you're also on last Friday night on the 9th. You were there for the studios presentation,
Yep.
which went like 3.5 hours, I want to say.
Yeah, it was punishing. It was really punishing. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was just. Did we need a 30-minute interlude to set to Disney Theatrical's upcoming slate? Which just announced that there was going to be a Hercules musical, which you and I have talked about, but you can inform the people on the history of that, but also that Frozen was coming to Disney Plus next year.
Yeah, but I think the big news out of that though was again making use of the Fox catalog with The Greatest Showman now being turned into a musical for the stage.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep it animated, Jim, because this is the animation podcast. But
no. I get that. I do. So now, speaking of which, let's walk through. Face it, we were already aware of Moana 2, which is coming out in November of 2024. Can you talk a bit about the clip?
Yeah, I mean, the show started with a musical number that was Elite Carvalho singing one of the big musical numbers from the movie, which is called "We're Back," which is something that I think they showed it at CinemaCon and Annecy this year. So clearly, this is the DMV scene for Moana 2 in the sense that it is the one that they show at every press event. But it was really cool. There were dancers and drummers and stuff on stage, and then The Rock came out and all of that. But you saw the new trailer, which came out simultaneously. What were your thoughts there?
It's intriguing that it's a little sister, right?
Yeah,
that's what she's got. I mean, I think they did a fine job. We've already had the teaser trailer, so this is our first real trailer and gave you a sense of the stakes and that sort of thing. So it feels like what a Moana sequel should be. It's more of the same, revisiting Maui and the world and the Kakamora and but I love the little subtle aging up that they did with the title character. Also, Pua's getting tough.
Yes.
He's a growing pig. But yeah, I have to admit, I'm somebody at some point has got to talk about the decision to change this from a limited series for Disney Plus to a theatrical release. And what fell off the table, because I would imagine that was 2 hours plus of animation at that point, and this is going to be standard Disney, somewhere 90 to 145 minutes long.
Yeah. I mean, as far as I know, it's going to be pretty tight. But I mean, there's a lot more characters. She has a whole crew this time. There's actually a Kakamora on her crew, which is kind of fun.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think it's going to be good. Okay. I think it's going to be good. Yeah.
All right. Well, I will say this much. In the animation booth, there on the floor at the D23 Expo, that there was a good solid line all day, all 3 days, for people to get in the photo op, which had her on the boat along with Maui and Pua and Hei, but they had an amazing carpet just below the faux boat of I guess this is the big thing, the whale shark features heavily in this thing, the big mystical animal. Also, conversely though, right across from this was the Zootopia 2 photo op, which was set in the wetlands thing, the marsh mark or whatever, but that also had a really strong line, and Jared Bush came on stage for this, did the announcement, right?
He did not come on stage. I don't. Maybe he did. I think it was actually just Jennifer Lee.
Okay.
I ran into Jared later in the show, just on the floor, so I got to say hello to him. But Yeah, it was one sequence. It was the marsh sequence, and it was just super entertaining. Everything that you expect from Zootopia in terms of like very rapid fire dialogue, great animal observational humor, and just breathtaking creature design. Corey Loftus is back to do that, and it looks like $1,000,000. And you know that this time, Jim, there are reptiles.
Yeah.
So that is the big addition. Yeah.
And again, I think you and I both went to the original Zootopia press event. They held that at Walt Disney World, and I'm forgetting which hotel they had.
That was the premiere. The premiere was at Walt Disney World.
There we
the
go.
Press event was at the Tahunga
That's right.
studio.
That's right.
Remember that because they were over there. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
That's right. But yeah, I mean, but again, that's November of 2025. And then Jennifer stood on the stage and shared a piece of concept art from Frozen 3.
Well, what was funny was she got on stage and she said, "We have another movie for 2026. It's too early to talk about."
There we go.
So we'll talk about Frozen 3, which is coming out in 2027.
Yeah.
I was like, okay.
Moved right by that.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of interesting. So,
yeah, I think Brittany Lee did the artwork that she showed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it was interesting. It was Anna on the shore and Elsa on her water horse, and then a shadow of a kind of Viking-ish figure that was very intriguing. Yeah.
Now, I also, and again, forgive me for bringing this up, but I recently did over at Disney Dish a couple of shows about Maelstrom. And the early take on the ride involved that the trolls were helping you find the Rainbow Bridge to Valhalla. And I couldn't help but notice in the upper left-hand corner of the image, there was some sort of weird kingdom up in the sky with a rainbow ridge leading to it, with two other dark Viking-ish characters up in the sky.
Oh, I didn't even notice that, Jim. So,
and it was one of these things with like, okay, so we have a sinister, but again, that what I loved about Brittany's concept painting is that if you look at it, they have Olaf on the back of Anna's horse doing this big take because he's the one who sees whoever it is who's casting the Viking shadow in the lower right-hand corner of the image. But it's just, Jennifer wasn't wrong. It was a great piece of concept art that sort of sold where sort of the feel of this next big adventure. But again, it's Frozen 3 and 4, right?
Yes, but 4 was not mentioned or dated or anything else. I mean, that was a, Bob Iger comment. So we will see if he's writing checks that Walt Disney Animation Studios now has to cash.
Very cool. Okay, so now I want to mention here, as we shift to the Pixar portion of the studio's presentation, that you actually got the opportunity to chat with Pete Docter before he went on stage and started talking about all the stuff that is coming down the pike from Emeryville.
Yes. Well, specifically about Elio, because during the presentation, he did not mention that Elio has 2 new directors, or that the character has gone from Elio's mother to Elio's aunt, and with that, a change in casting from America Ferrera to Zoe Saldana. So, we chatted about all of it. So it was very interesting. Now, that was not brought up at all on stage.
Okay, and not to tell tales out of school here, but I want to say as far back as January of this year, you gave me a heads up about this director change. But again, we were not allowed to talk about it, so we vaulted this. So this has been going on for a while now.
It's been going on for a while. Pete told me that Adrian Molina had been pulled off to work on a priority project, which, if you are reading the tea leaves, is probably something that rhymes with Boko 2. I don't know if I can, if we can speculate on what that might be. But
Okay.
there was a
Okay.
ride which we'll talk about,
Mhm.
I'm sure, that was announced for DCA that might give you a
Yeah.
clue as to what Adrian
They,
is working on now. Yeah.
there we go. There we
Yeah.
go. But before we get that, well, no, Elio is still on track for. Is it March of next year or is it June of next year?
Elio is next June.
Next year.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but coming in 2026. And again, this is um, Drew has been in the know about this. Let me explain here. Drew and I have the same problem whenever we go up to Emeryville. You know that we'll step away to go to the bathroom, and
Yeah.
then we get lost or we get turned around and we wander hallways trying to make our way back to the place where we're chatting with folks, and you sometimes see things on the walls, and this was when you got to see pictures of beavers, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
There were those rumors of like a movie about ducks or something, and it was like, it's
Yeah.
not ducks, it's beavers. It was, I mean, the working title was called Hops, and obviously the final title is now Hoppers.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this is for 2026,
Mm-hmm.
and so this is the other movie besides Toy Story 5 that will be coming out
Mm-hmm.
that year.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this is the new movie by the creator of We Bare Bears, Daniel
Mm-hmm.
Chong, and I think that's super exciting. And
Oh, I
yeah, it
agree.
sounds
I agree.
absolutely insane. It's about a girl who puts her mind in the body of a robotic beaver and gets accepted into beaver culture, including a king beaver played by Bobby Moynihan and an evil developer.
There
Yes,
we go.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
John
John
Hamm.
Hamm.
So
Yes, yes.
yeah, and they showed a. Now, was this the teaser trailer, or was this a scene from the movie?
There wasn't a full trailer. It was just some
Hmm.
stuff from the movie, but it was very funny and very wacky. And I can't wait. I mean, it was, Elio and Hoppers were really the two original titles that were talked about during the presentation. So it was very nice.
Cool, cool. All right, but as you mentioned, we knew Toy Story 5 was coming, and again, June 19th, 2026. Didn't know the story, but now we have a toys versus tech and I guess we're assuming, given the piece of concept art that was shared, this is Bonnie who's now become sort of transfixed by her tablet.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is I'm very curious about what the time will be because the first three Toy Stories really kind of progressed as the movies came out. Not exactly the same, but
Mm-hmm.
Andy was obviously getting bigger to the point where he was going to college in the third one. So I
Mm-hmm.
wonder if they're going to age up Bonnie in the same way. But it was
Mm-hmm.
nice to see like that Forky was still there.
Yep.
It'll be interesting to reconcile the ending of 4 with the beginning of this
I
one.
I was about to ask about that because the art shows, in fact, there's a fascinating piece of concept art that they shared. It's Bonnie under a blanket, but you can see her lit from beneath the blanket because
Yeah.
by her tablet, but standing at the end of her bed looking on concerned is it's Buzz, it's Jesse, it's Woody. And I want to say Rex and Ham, and as you mentioned, Forky, but it's again, I don't know. I mean, I want them to undo the ending of 4. I mean, I was not necessarily a fan of 4, but I loved the ending of 4.
Right.
It had a great emotional moment, and Woody was finally allowed to go off with Bo and have a lovely adventure and live happily ever after. And I don't know if I want that undone.
Yeah. It's also interesting because Toy Story The Time Forgot
Hmm.
also focused on toys versus screens, if you'll recall.
That's also interesting. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Kind of, but also worth noting that this is Andrew Stanton coming back. He's writing, directing. So that's kind of a big deal. And speaking of kind of a big deal, the other big announcement, of course, is of an Incredibles 3. In fact, that was the big sort of mic drop before Pete walked off stage, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think anybody was ready for that. But yeah, I'm excited for it. You know, they said that Brad Bird was in development on it. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm somewhat skeptical of
Okay.
that phrasing because he still has a long way to go on a little movie called Ray Gun.
There we go.
So,
There we go.
we will see. But
Oh,
yeah.
before we forget, we also have the two Pixar projects for Disney Plus. We have Win or Lose, which we finally have a release date for that shows up on that subscription streaming service in December 6th of this year. What was the reaction to the footage in the room, Drew?
I mean, that was great. You know me, I've been a all hands, all on board win or lose
Mm-hmm.
since even before I saw an episode
Mm-hmm.
at Annecy last year. And they screened 2 episodes actually at D23.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the other announcement, which had a whole trailer, was for Dream Productions.
Yeah.
Which is the Inside Out spinoff, which they actually showed an episode of as a surprise in another panel that weekend.
Oh,
Of course, the panel
dang.
I was not at or was not given the heads up
Oh,
that the episode was being
man. Okay.
screened.
I
Yeah.
missed that as well. Dang it.
Yeah. But great response. I talked to Mike Jones, who is a great writer and director over at Pixar, who's overseeing Dream Productions.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he said it was great. So yeah, I'm looking forward to both.
Okay. Okay. All right. One other thing before we move along here. We got just sort of a taste of the live action Lilo and Stitch that's coming in next summer of 2025. What was the reaction in the room to that footage?
It was fine. I mean, that footage went online as well. It's just a little. It's almost like an animation test for him. I think DNEG is doing the animation, but it looked great. It's very funny because I recently asked Chris Sanders, about. Because he'll have 2 live action versions of his movies next year with Lilo and Stitch and How to Train Your Dragon.
Oh, that's right.
So I said,
Yeah.
what are you looking for that? And he said, we talked about doing Lilo and Stitch in 3D, and it was the characters were a little weird, but I thought this Stitch looked great. I thought it really captured that spirit, and Chris is back to do the voice, which is great. So yeah.
By the way, speaking of Lilo and Stitch, and in fact, it's Drew was kind enough to make me aware of that. Again, I've been collecting Chris Sanders sketchbooks that he would sell at Comic-Con for years now. In fact, I just recently eyeballed picking up the 8th one, and it's just sort of like, well, I could retire or I could buy this sketchbook. But the other book, what is it? Animation is Life. Is that the event that was held last year in October?
It was Lightbox.
Okay,
in Pasadena.
Lightbox.
Yeah.
Okay. But I want to say Chris and his lovely bride Jennifer, I want to say, they collaborated on a book booklet called From Pitch to Stitch that covers the history of this project. And I only, in fact, it was my daughter who clued me in while I was in town. That Stuart Ning had somehow managed to get a couple of these booklets, and I literally drove out there the Monday after Comic-Con, excuse me, after the D23 Expo ended. I was there as the store opened at 11 o'clock in the morning to make sure I could grab a copy of this. And what's great about this, Drew, is it has the original pitch for it. And had you ever heard of the original ending for Lilo and Stitch?
No, well, is this the ending from his children's book version or the pitch that he?
Well, this is the I guess for the pitch where the Madam Councilwoman, I want to say Judi Dench did the voice for it, and it's a very different take on it. It's Lilo. I mean, we all know the moment from the finished film where Lilo goes up to her with the "I paid $4 for the dog license," and and if you take him, this is stealing. And what happens is the Madam Councilwoman literally takes the license out of Lilo's hand and crumples it up in a ball and throws it away and said, "I didn't see that." And but then it turns into this. Uh, I'm Spartacus thing where different characters stand up, where Lonnie stands up. Well, I saw it, and other people at the beach, and finally it's Pleakley who stands up and says, "Well, I saw it, and I'm an officer of the Intergalactic Court." And it was it was one of these things where it's like, at that point, the councilwoman has no choice; she has to leave Stitch behind. But it's all of these characters standing up for Stitch on the beach, and it was this lovely little moment that I almost wish had made it into the show.
That's cute. I mean, I think it might have been a beat too many.
No, it's so interesting you say that because I remember talking with Tony Bancroft about that very same issue with the end of Mulan. And just the notion was that the gang of three should have a big goodbye, but they kept making it bigger. They kept making it smaller. It just sort of felt like at this point, this is really, we need to get Mulan back to her dad. But at the same time, it's like these guys have been in her corner the whole time. The audience wants to see them say goodbye to her. And but you're right, finding just that right mix. But anyway, drove out there, picked up a copy of that, and also got a couple of other books, which, by the way, we'll talk about on the second half of today's show. And we're back. All right. All right. So Drew just kind of referred to something earlier, a ride that's being proposed for Disneyland, a boat ride for that matter, themed around Coco, which was again part of the studio presentation. In fact, there were a lot of animation-based rides at this time around, weren't there?
A lot. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have the Cars Land coming to the remains of the Rivers of America.
Yeah.
We have Disney Villains, which is all, from what they showed, all animated characters. Mm-hmm. You know, they were pretty vague about that, but yeah, there was a lot of and obviously the Monsters Inc. coaster, which Yep. When did that leak on the cast member portal, Jim? What year was that?
I want to say it was 2008. And in fact, the story that's always been explained to me was, remember, in that same window of time, we got remember when they were going to do Hyperion Wharf as a replacement for Pleasure Island?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, it was the financial correction of 2008 that killed both of those projects. That Disney was suddenly, people were sort of taking a pause on big expensive vacations to Orlando, and it's like, well, let's not get ahead of ourselves here. So the Doors coaster went back in the draw, and so it's nice to see it revived after all these years. So what is that? 16 years?
Yeah.
Downside.
16 years for it. The ride looks like it'll last about 16 seconds based on that model. So.
Oh, okay. We're making friends left and right at Disney. On the other hand, let's talk about that Coco boat ride, because I think I've actually shared that slide from the PowerPoint presentation that we're going to do for Epcot about listing out the next 7 or 8 years worth of projects there. And one of the things that was being proposed, that was scheduled and budgeted, was a redo of, I always call it Rivers of Time, but now it's what, the Grand Fiesta with the Three Caballeros, the
Grand
boat
Fiesta tour,
yeah,
Three Caballeros,
yeah, but that was good. I want to say they're going to spend $70 million to retheme that around Coco. But again, same thing, fell off the table, but now resurrected as a thing for DCA. And face it, DCA is leaning heavily into Coco. In fact, when I couldn't help but notice is when I was driving back from Stewart's, and by way of Tommy's, by the way, went to the Tommy's on Rampart and had my chili cheeseburger. But the billboards for celebration of Familia Plaza at
Yep.
DCA. That starts August 23rd and runs all the way through November 5th. But that's a Coco themed celebration in that park. And when this ride finally comes online, that will allow this park to even get further into the Coco business. But so you're hearing sequel, really?
I am. I have heard I have heard tell of a sequel to Coco being a possibility. Let's just say that.
Okay, let's keep this as vague as possible.
Yes, vague as possible, but I've also heard I kind of like the Coco addition to DCA because it's kind of like this Baja California. I'm the only one that actually cares about any of this stuff making any sense in California Adventure, but
Yeah.
I do. Where Pandora. It's so funny, when I drive to Santa Monica, Jim, and I pass the forest moon of Pandora,
Well, I actually, what's interesting? Well, I think you've had some conversations with our friend Mr. Schul about where these things might go, and I have to admit, I'm kind of intrigued about Pandora going into the Hollywood backlot. Look. Face it, you go to a Disney theme park, you arrive at turn of the century America, and then at the end of the street, there's a storybook castle. So you're willing to make certain allowances. But the notion of coming down Buena Vista Street and making the left, it's like, wow.
Can't wait to sit outside at Carthay Circle and watch the Tulkun come out of the water.
There we
Jim,
go. There we go. Look at the giant blue people. So, but on the other hand, to put that right next to the Avengers campus, which again is supposed to become home to Avengers Infinity Defense ride, which, by the way, got announced 2 D23s ago, and it finally is actually going to happen. But yeah, it's how long till the California just falls out of the name of that park and it's just Disney Adventure, or what are they calling the studios in Paris?
World Adventure.
Yeah, Disney
Adventure
the
World. Yeah.
There we go. I'm going to be kind of intrigued to see whether or not that name comes west. But
well, the other funny thing about the parks presentation was them showing artwork with the 2019 Lion King and having them go, it's the 1994 Lion King, we swear.
Yeah.
It's like I can see the
No, that's it exactly.
I mean, in this picture.
Yeah, literally. It's just sort of like, okay. I mean, that's a bunch of people assuming that the Barry Jenkins thing is going to be another $1 billion earner, the Mufasa, the Lion King. And this is a franchise that goes forward, so why not celebrate it? But but again, Coco, there is obviously a hunger and a desire to see that film in the parks, but which forgive me for the awkward transition here, but somebody else who does a wonderful job celebrating Hispanic culture is, of course, Jorge Gutierrez. And I'm showing Drew here my copy that I got from Gallery Nucleus of the El Tigre, The Adventures of Manny Rivera, the Art of Book, which very, very, very much looking forward to. But this arrived while I was out in California, but another book I was chasing down, and in fact went up to Disney Press deliberately to buy a copy of. Again, you got to interview the author of Pete Docter's wonderful directing at Disney, the original directors of Walt's animated films. And this is something that Pete did with Don Perry. Did you get to talk with him at all about that?
No, I've talked to him about it before because he was kind of pitching it to me. He was saying, nobody really knows who directed those movies. And I said, you're right.
No.
Nobody does. I mean, it was sort of a team effort.
Mm-hmm.
There were sequence directors. Wooly was a single director, I think, in like starting in the 70s. But even on Black Cauldron, there were, I think, sequence directors. So, this will be an indispensable document for those earlier films. And it's big too. I saw it. I
Yeah.
saw how big it was. It's a nice thick book, right?
No, it's
Jim's
definitely
just reading it now.
Well, there was you were mentioning Wooly, and there were a couple of great stories in here from people we now think of as old men of animation. But there's a great story in here about Glenn Keane pitching a what is it, a possum character to Wooly for the Rescuers, and it's so funny to read what Glenn Keane is young and just sort of freaking out, like he passes Wooly in the hall, and Wooly's like, "Good morning, Glenn," and it's like, "Oh my God, he knows my name!" And it just to read from that's, I think, the thing that Doctor and Perry did that's wonderful about this book is they collected all of these real-time stories about the guys who actually made these movies. And but also I do want to caution folks, Drew kind of nailed it. This is really more of a reference book than a fun read. It's sort of, he directed this sequence, he directed that sequence. And so don't go into this assuming that you're going to see the movie of directing at Disney. That's not the case.
Right. But it is nice because you can point to who animated scenes, but few times can you say who directed the sequences. So I'm very excited.
No. It's a great book to have if you're an animation fan and want to further understand the behind the scenes. And speaking of which, though, and Drew, I have been waiting on this book forever, but Steven Anderson's Disney in Between the Lost Years 1966 through 1986. Old Mill Press finally sent this one out the door, and I've been waiting on this one forever. And for example, there's a great section in here just about the Black Cauldron. In fact, it just looks at the actual cauldron. Ooh. But it's just so nice to finally have some in-depth information about the most underreported period in Disney company history. Though I know somebody who's potentially working on a book about the 90s, which deserves to have its spotlight shined on it.
Yes.
Did we score any stories for the book at this year's D23 Expo?
This week? No, not really. I was too busy walking around with you and Jim Schul and eating a questionable burrito with you two.
Oh, but
that was really the highlight. You know, seeing people that you don't get to see all the time, that's really the highlight of D23 in my book.
You know, same thing here. That was honestly, that was Saturday before you then had to head off and do the parks presentation. But yeah, I have to ask, because Drew sprang for arguably the very best collectible coming out of this year's D23 Expo, that Starspeeder 3000 that actually plays.
The Starspeeder 3000. Yeah, Guy Selga called it the greatest theme park merchandise of all time.
I have to admit, if I didn't have to go pay way too much for that from pitch to stitch, I potentially would have sprung for that thing, but it was,
yeah.
So how did I think you how did you describe it? It was going to be the first decoration in your post-divorce apartment.
Yeah, it was going to be basically me signing my divorce papers in the Starspeeder, but my wife was very accommodating and very gracious as always. So
well,
it's great. I'm so glad I got it. I got a little Rex figure as well. And then when I saw that they had actually sold out online and at the store, I was glad to do it. I'm glad I did it.
No. Again, I totally envious. Amazing purchase. I get the only thing, folks, is we left the hall to go back to Drew's hotel room, because how much did that thing actually weigh?
Oh, it must have weighed 10 pounds. I mean, it was, and it's so awkwardly sized. Was the other thing.
Yeah. That was the thing. We took mercy on Drew and walked him back to his hotel so he didn't have to schlep it around the halls. But
yes.
But Anyway, it was again. It was a lovely time to get to hang with you and Mr. Schul and Brian Gahn, and likewise the Herseys, and of course the lovely Angela Ragno. But at the same time, to come away with all of these stories and all of this info that Drew and I will be sharing on future editions of Fine Tuning. But for now, for the Fried edition of the Fine Tuning, I think that's going to do it for this time around, Drew. So, all right. So let's talk about your other wonderful podcast, which is, of course, is the Light the Fuse, the official Mission Impossible podcast, which has been on hiatus for a bit. But we were also kind of hoping what with
Yep.
Mr. Cruz's rather stunning appearance at the end of the Summer Olympics. In fact, I think you were mentioning that they had been shooting something up on the Hollywood sign, and we finally got to see what he was doing, and that was kind of cool.
Yeah, that was so great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was so cool. Yeah, we're still sort of in a holding pattern, but we'll be back soon. But you know what? Why don't you go listen to earlier episodes, older episodes? We got a lot.
No, seriously, folks, there's great stories there from all sorts of folks who've worked on the Mission Impossible movies. But what's also terrific about what Drew and Charles Hood do when they sit down with these folks is they talk about their entire career, and you get these wonderful side stories about other films that they worked on. That's half the fun of the show for me. It's like I learned so much from people who've worked on a lot of my favorite films, not just the Mission Impossible movies. And speaking of listening to podcasts, we have a few here we'd like you to listen to. We, of course, have Disney Dish, which I do with Len Testa. Likewise, there is, of course, the Looking at Lucasfilm, which I do with Brian Gahn. In fact, we're going to be doing a post D23 episode as well, talking about all the Lucasfilm stuff that got talked up at this year's show. I also, in the next couple of days, will be recording a brand new episode of I Want That Too with Lauren Hersey, and again, covering a lot of the amazing merch we saw at the show. And yeah, that Starspeeder 2000 was cool, but there was other stuff. And then we're also going to be talking with Eric Hersey about the Universal, our Epic Universal podcast. And what was so fascinating about the parks presentation and all of this stuff that got announced from Disney, it's that you have to acknowledge the fact that Disney would not be spending this $60 billion over the next 10 years if Universal weren't laying down cards left and right. I mean, the Epic Universe park alone is enough to get Disney to decide, okay, let's get serious and let's do things like build the Cars Road Rally at the Magic Kingdom, which comes at the price of Tom Sawyer's Island. Beyond that, I want to remind you, we also have our Patreon project that Len and I do with retired Imagineer Jim Schul. And this month, we are talking up water at the Disney theme parks. In fact, Mr. Schul and I will be recording a story about the Storybook Land canal boats, which the reimagined version of that's about to open at Disneyland Paris. And kind of breaks my heart that that used to end with an amazing Wizard of Oz scene. But this is the modern Disney company, so Oz has been traded for Paradise Falls from Up. That you get to see a miniature recreation of that.
Okay.
All right. Beyond that, folks, I want to ask if you could do Mr. Taylor and I a favor, if you could head over to Apple Podcasts and rate and review not just the show you're listening to right now, Fine Tuning, but also, again, Light the Fuse, the official Mission Impossible podcast. And beyond that, social media, Drew. Where can the nice folks find you on that?
Yeah, same as always. Drew Tailored, like a tailored shirt on whatever platform you're on, but mostly on X and Instagram. What about you, Jim? Where can we find you?
I also am X and Twitter, likewise Instagram as Jim Hill Media, and then over on Facebook. There we go. Facebook. as Jim Hill Media News. And okay, that's going to do it for Mr. Taylor and myself. And we're both going to lie down now and take a nap for a couple of days.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
but we will be back next week with a more scripted show. But back with the animation news that I hope you look forward to. But till then, thank you for listening, and Drew and I will be back soon.